What would you do if your entire existence unraveled before your eyes, revealing that everything you believed in was a lie? Could you bear the weight of a truth so devastating it could obliterate the life you had so carefully built? This true crime tale delves into the harrowing discovery of a husband who unearthed a horrifying secret about his wife, one that culminated in a blood-soaked tragedy that shook Tampa, Florida, to its core. This isn't just a story of hidden truths or broken trust. It's a chilling plunge into a marriage overcome by horror, a tale so shocking it stunned even the most hardened investigators. The revelation was devastating, a secret so dark it tore lives apart and led to one of the city's most horrifying murders. On the surface, Dwayne Chad and Ellie Reed appeared to be the perfect couple. Welcome to Crime Wave Stories HQ. I want to thank all my viewers, especially my subscribers, for your continued support as we strive to improve and bring you daily updates on both told and untold crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Their love story was something out of a romantic fantasy, a relationship others admired and aspired to emulate. Both were Black Americans hailing from the vibrant heart of Tampa, Florida. They met at a community event hosted by their church, where their lives intersected in what seemed to be a destined connection. Dwayne, a towering man of 32, exuded strength and resilience. His rugged good looks mirrored his steadfast personality. As a construction worker, he was deeply rooted in his family and community, a man molded by his conservative upbringing. Dwayne carried a profound sense of duty, one that drove him to care for others with little regard for himself. His friends often joked that Dwayne was the quintessential provider, someone who placed others' needs above his own. He lived by a traditional moral code, valuing loyalty, hard work, and the sanctity of marriage. Ellie Reed, on the other hand, was a vision of elegance and allure. At 28, she commanded attention effortlessly with her striking beauty. Her radiant brown skin, magnetic dark eyes, and luminous smile made her unforgettable. As a hairstylist, Ellie was building a reputation in Tampa's beauty scene, admired for her ambition and charm. But it was her warmth and the ease with which she made people feel valued that drew others in, Dwayne included. From the moment they met, he was captivated by her presence. Their courtship was a whirlwind of passion. It wasn't long before Dwayne began introducing Ellie to his loved ones, bringing her to family gatherings and proudly declaring her as the one. She seemed to fit perfectly into his world, quickly earning the approval of his mother, siblings, and closest friends. Dwayne had fallen deeply, his love for her so profound that he proposed within a year of their first encounter. Ellie, her eyes glistening with emotion, accepted without hesitation. To those on the outside, their life seemed charmed. A fairy tale come to life. Their wedding day was nothing short of a dream, a grand celebration hosted at the historic Tampa Baptist Church with over 200 guests in attendance. Every detail was perfect. Dwayne stood at the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation as Ellie floated toward him in a dazzling white gown that made her look otherworldly. In that moment, Dwayne felt like the luckiest man alive, blessed to have found someone so radiant and full of love. Yet even amidst the magic of their wedding day, there were subtle but unmistakable signs of unease. Ellie's eyes, though bright with a smile, would occasionally wander to some distant, unreachable place. A fleeting shadow would cross her face, hinting at a burden she bore in silence. But Dwayne, caught up in his blissful ignorance, brushed off these moments as nothing more than wedding day jitters. He had no way of knowing that beneath the seemingly perfect facade of their life together lay hidden cracks, fissures so deep that, once revealed, would irreparably shatter their world. When Dwayne and Ellie exchanged vows, he noticed her hands trembling, the faintest of quivers. He brushed it off, attributing it to the natural nerves of a wedding day. Still, there was an undercurrent of something more, a sense that something wasn't quite right. Their honeymoon was nothing short of luxurious. Determined to create unforgettable memories, Dwayne whisked Ellie away to the Caribbean for 2 weeks of blissful sun, sparkling sands, and deep romance. But even in paradise, Dwayne couldn't ignore the subtle wall between them. In moments of quiet, Ellie would withdraw, her expression distant, as though wrestling with something locked deep within her. When Dwayne asked what was wrong, she'd offer a fleeting smile and wave away his concerns. "Don't worry about me, baby," she'd say, wrapping her arms around him. Her warmth soothed his doubts, but the lingering unease gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Ellie was hiding something. When they returned home, life seemed to settle into the rhythm of newlywed bliss. They moved into a cozy home on the outskirts of Tampa, a peaceful neighborhood where they could build their future. Dwayne worked tirelessly on the yard during weekends, while Ellie focused on expanding her beauty business. To anyone looking in, it was a picture-perfect life, a loving wife, a welcoming home, and a bright future. Yet the cracks beneath the surface began to widen. Over time, Dwayne noticed subtle shifts in Ellie's behavior. She grew secretive, shielding her phone whenever he was near and disappearing for hours without explanation. Late nights at work became more frequent. She insisted her salon business was booming, but when Dwayne dropped by unannounced, he often found the place eerily empty. Her explanations became more elaborate: friends he'd never met, sudden errands that couldn't wait, hushed phone conversations. Dwayne's heart ached with suspicion, though he fought against it. He didn't want to believe that the woman he adored, the woman he had built his life around, was keeping something from him. The thought twisted like a blade in his chest. Convincing himself it was all in his head, Dwayne tried to dismiss the doubts, chalking it up to the pressures of married life. No relationship is perfect, after all. But the distance between them only grew. Intimacy, once filled with passion, became infrequent and strained. When they were together, Ellie seemed distracted, her eyes avoiding his as though burdened by an unspoken truth. Sometimes, it seemed she was on the verge of confessing, her lips parting as if to release the secret she carried, but the words never came. And then came the night that would change everything. Driven by his growing doubts, Dwayne did something he had sworn never to do: he searched through Ellie's belongings. While she was out with friends, he rummaged through drawers, seeking the answer to the questions that haunted him. In the back of their closet, hidden beneath layers of old clothes, Dwayne found a small box. It was unassuming, yet its contents would shatter his world. Inside were documents that made his blood run cold. Among them was a birth certificate with a name he didn't recognize: Elijah Reed. Confusion gave way to dread as he dug deeper, uncovering medical records that dated back years. They told a story Dwayne never saw coming: details of Ellie's transition from male to female. In that moment, Dwayne's entire reality collapsed. The air seemed to vanish from the room, leaving him gasping as the weight of the revelation bore down on him. Everything he thought he knew, everything he believed, was called into question. Dwayne's hands trembled as the weight of the revelation consumed him. The woman he had pledged his love and life to, the one he had believed in with all his heart, had kept this monumental truth from him. Ellie had been born male, and she had never told him. This wasn't just a secret, it was, to Dwayne, a betrayal of the foundation on which their entire relationship had been built. A storm of emotions swirled in his mind: anger, confusion, heartbreak. How could she have hidden something so profound? How could she have let him build a life with someone he suddenly felt he didn't even know? The woman he adored, the partner he trusted implicitly, now felt like a stranger. This discovery was more than a shock. It was the first crack in a dam about to burst, unleashing a torrent of chaos that would end in unspeakable tragedy. What Dwayne couldn't foresee in that moment was just how deeply his feelings of betrayal and fury would pull him into a darkness he had never known. Sitting in silence, he stared at the documents scattered across their bed, his thoughts a chaotic maze with no exit. Questions raced through his mind, each one laced with pain. How long had she hidden this? How could she have deceived him about something so intrinsic, so personal? The ticking clock on the wall echoed in the stillness, amplifying the weight of his despair. His rage, simmering just beneath the surface, began to boil. When Ellie returned home that evening, she stepped into a storm she had long dreaded. The moment she saw Dwayne sitting on the edge of their bed, her heart dropped. Her gaze shifted to the documents laid bare before him, her most guarded secret exposed. The color drained from her face, and her fingers gripped the doorknob as if bracing herself for what was to come. "You lied to me," Dwayne said, his voice low and trembling, thick with rage. He rose slowly, holding the papers in his hand as though they were damning evidence. Who are you, Ellie? No. What are you? Ellie's breath caught in her throat as the gravity of the moment struck her. She had always feared this day, the day her past would surface. She had imagined countless ways to reveal the truth to Dwayne but had been paralyzed by the fear of losing him. Now, that decision had been ripped from her hands. Dwayne, please, she began, stepping cautiously toward him, her voice trembling with desperation. I was going to tell you. I swear I was. I didn't know how. I love you. This doesn't change who I am, who we are. Her eyes brimmed with tears, her words pleading for understanding. But instead of softening, Dwayne's rage only deepened. Doesn't change who you are? He barked, his voice rising as his anger took hold. You've been lying to me this whole time, Ellie. You tricked me into marrying you. Do you have any idea what you've done? I gave you everything, my love, my loyalty, my life. And you lied about the most basic thing, who you are. Ellie's tears flowed freely now, her voice breaking under the weight of her emotions. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you, Dwayne. You mean everything to me. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me anymore. Dwayne's face twisted, his fury exploding into venomous words. You thought right. He spat, his voice seething with rage and disgust. His emotions surged out of control, an unstoppable tide of betrayal and anguish. The room, once their shared haven, felt suffocating now, closing in on him as his world crumbled. Ellie stood her ground, her tears blurring her vision but her resolve firm. She desperately wanted him to understand, to see that her love for him was real, untainted by the secret she had carried for so long. But Dwayne couldn't hear her. His thoughts were a cacophony of anger and heartbreak, his mind unwilling to reconcile the woman he loved with the secret she had kept. Their argument spiraled into a dangerous crescendo. Dwayne's anger crackled like a live wire, erratic, volatile, and impossible to contain. Ellie, caught between her need to explain and her growing fear, watched as the man she loved unraveled before her. Each word exchanged felt like a step closer to a breaking point, one that neither of them could foresee but both could feel looming in the air. She had never seen him like this before, a man so consumed by fury, so lost in the abyss of hate. As Dwayne stormed around the room, his voice escalating with each word, Ellie's chest tightened with dread. Her heart raced as she watched the rage swell within him, a force she had no way of controlling. Dwayne, please calm down. We can talk about this, she pleaded, her voice trembling. I'll tell you everything, answer all your questions, just please, don't do anything you'll regret. But Dwayne wasn't listening. Her words bounced off the walls, unable to pierce the fog of his anger. To him, every moment of their life together felt like a cruel joke, a fabrication. His breathing quickened, his fists clenched, and his eyes burned with a fiery intensity that seemed to consume him. Calm down? He roared, his voice raw with emotion. You've been lying to me for years, and now you want me to calm down? In the grip of his blind rage, Dwayne stormed into the garage. His eyes darted around until they landed on a hammer, its metal head glinting under the dim light. He snatched it up without hesitation, his mind clouded by a chilling sense of purpose. He returned to the house, his grip tightening around the hammer's handle, his steps heavy with fury. Ellie stood frozen in the bedroom, her eyes wide with terror as Dwayne approached. She tried to speak, to reach him, but before the words could leave her lips, he raised the hammer high and brought it down with devastating force. Her scream pierced the air as she lifted her arms in a desperate attempt to shield herself. But Dwayne was unrelenting, his rage boiling over in a series of brutal, merciless blows. The room was soon painted with blood, the walls and floor bearing witness to his horrific wrath. Her pleas for mercy were drowned out by the sound of metal meeting flesh, her voice swallowed by the maelstrom of his fury. The violence did not end with her final breath. Dwayne, consumed by a darkness that had completely overtaken him, dragged her lifeless body into the bathroom. His mind spiraled further into a twisted madness as he retrieved a knife from the kitchen. The fury that had driven him now gave way to a grotesque obsession. He began to mutilate her body, the blade tearing through flesh with savage abandon. He slashed and cut until the person she once was became unrecognizable, her body left as a horrifying testament to his unbridled rage. By the time the authorities arrived, the home had become a vision of pure carnage. Blood soaked every surface, the air thick with the metallic tang of death. And there, in the center of it all, Dwayne sat motionless, his body smeared with blood, his hands resting limply at his sides. His eyes stared into the middle distance, empty and lost, as though his mind was trapped in the moment he had created. His face bore an expression of disbelief, as if even he couldn't fathom the horror he had wrought. Shaking, Dwayne reached for his phone. His fingers slipped on the bloodied screen as he dialed 911. When the operator answered, his voice was hollow, stripped of all emotion. "I killed her," he whispered, the words barely audible. The operator asked questions, trying to keep him on the line, but Dwayne could hardly form a coherent thought. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, a crushing realization that his life, everything he once was over. When the police burst through the door, they were met with a scene of unparalleled brutality. Blood covered every surface, and in the middle of the chaos, Dwayne sat beside Ellie's mutilated body. His face was streaked with tears, his hands stained red, his soul shattered under the enormity of his crime. The man who had once been a proud husband, a figure of strength and stability, now sat as a broken shadow of himself, consumed by the nightmare he had unleashed. The news of Ellie's death sent shockwaves through their tight-knit Tampa community. As the gruesome details of the crime emerged, so did the truth about Ellie's secret. The media descended upon the story, and soon, the nation was gripped by the horrific tragedy, sparking a firestorm of debate that reached far beyond their shattered home. Some saw Dwayne as a man broken by betrayal, while others condemned him as nothing less than a monster. Yet no narrative, no judgment, could undo what had been done. Ellie was gone. What began as a secret cloaked in fear ended in a horrifying, violent death. When the police dragged Dwayne from the blood-soaked floor of their quiet suburban home, the magnitude of the tragedy became undeniable. Outside, neighbors gathered, their murmurs heavy with dread as the oppressive Tampa humidity clung to them. Flashing blue and red lights painted the scene in a surreal glow, their reflections flickering against shattered windows and broken lives. Dwayne, still drenched in Ellie's blood, stared blankly ahead, his eyes vacant as though the horror he had wrought was beyond his grasp to understand. Detectives arriving on the scene were seasoned in their line of work, yet nothing could steel them for what awaited inside. Ellie's body, mangled beyond recognition, lay sprawled in the bathroom in a pool of crimson. The walls, once immaculate, now bore chaotic streaks of blood, the macabre evidence of a love that had soured into something unimaginable. The house itself, once a haven of affection, had become a tomb for betrayal and devastation. Later, at the station, Dwayne sat alone in an interrogation room. His blood-stained clothes were replaced by a plain white jumpsuit, but no amount of cleansing could remove the ghostly weight of that day from his skin. For hours, detectives pressed him, trying to unravel the chain of events that had led to such unthinkable brutality. "Why, Dwayne?" one detective asked, his tone steady but laced with urgency. "Why did you do it?" For the first time, Dwayne stirred. His hollow eyes met the detective's gaze, and a whisper escaped his lips. "I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing," he murmured, his voice frail and disoriented. "I loved her, but she lied to me. She wasn't who she said she was." The detective leaned forward, his voice tightening. "So you beat her to death? And then mutilated her? Do you even realize what you've done, Dwayne?" Dwayne's gaze dropped, his silence heavy with remorse, or perhaps avoidance. Whatever clarity he had about that day was buried beneath layers of anguish and instability. The truth that emerged painted a man teetering on the brink, his mind fractured under the strain of betrayal and his own festering insecurities. Yet the crime itself was beyond comprehension, its viciousness splashed across headlines nationwide. What made the case even more polarizing was the revelation of Ellie's identity as a transgender woman, a detail that ignited fierce debates on trust, identity, and the precarious boundaries of human relationships. To some, Dwayne was irredeemable, a monster whose insecurities had driven him to unspeakable violence. To others, disturbingly, he was a tragic figure, someone provoked into madness by what they perceived as deception. As the trial loomed, Dwayne's defense team worked to craft a narrative of emotional instability, claiming that his discovery of Ellie's truth had shattered him, pushing him into a spiral of uncontrollable rage. They sought to depict him as a man overwhelmed by shock and heartbreak, consumed by emotions he couldn't contain. But the prosecution painted a starker picture, one of a calculated killer who had unleashed savage fury upon his wife in an act of pure rage. As Ellie's character and life were dissected in public, the tragedy deepened. The court became a stage for scrutiny, where the love they once shared was overshadowed by the brutal way it had ended. And at the heart of it all was Dwayne, a man whose hollow eyes and blood-stained hands bore the weight of a crime that would haunt all who heard its tale. Witnesses were summoned to recount what they knew. Friends and neighbors painted a picture of Dwayne and Ellie as a seemingly happy couple, though whispers about Dwayne's controlling tendencies lingered beneath the surface. In court, the gruesome details of the crime scene emerged, images of the blood-splattered walls, the hammer Dwayne used in his attack, and the unrecognizable remains of Ellie's body. The jury sat paralyzed in a silence heavy with shock and revulsion. The most heartbreaking moment came when Ellie's mother took the stand. Her face was a portrait of anguish as she described the love her daughter had for Dwayne, the man she once believed would cherish her. With a voice trembling from grief, she confessed how Ellie had wrestled with the fear of revealing her truth, clinging to a fragile hope that Dwayne might one day accept her as she truly was. Her words hung like a shadow over the courtroom, unbearable yet inescapable. She just wanted to be loved, her mother whispered. And instead she was murdered. After weeks of gut-wrenching testimonies, impassioned arguments, and emotional appeals from both sides, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Dwayne sat stoic as the words landed, his face a blank canvas of resignation. Once a man with the promise of a future as a husband and partner, he now faced life as a convicted killer, his existence hollowed by the enormity of his crime. As officers escorted him out of the courtroom, Dwayne stole a fleeting glance at the gallery. Ellie's family sat together, their eyes brimming with unbearable sorrow and unhealed wounds. The verdict, though final, offered no solace. No punishment could return what was lost, nor could it erase the void left in their lives. Beyond the courtroom walls, the case ignited fierce conversations on social media. Clips of the trial and harrowing documentaries quickly went viral, garnering millions of views and spreading Ellie's story far and wide. Her friends and allies rallied, mourning the loss of a woman who sought only to live her truth but paid the ultimate price for doing so. The hashtag Justice for Ellie became a rallying cry, shining a spotlight on the violence disproportionately faced by Black transgender women and demanding meaningful change. The suburban house where Ellie had died eventually found a new owner, but its walls seemed to carry the memory of what had transpired. The neighborhood, too, bore the weight of the tragedy, a scar that would take years to fade, if it ever did. For Dwayne's family, reconciling the man they knew with the monster described in court was an impossible task. Some struggled to believe he could commit such a heinous act, while others grappled with the darker truth that they might never have truly known him at all. This story was never just about a murder. It was about the devastating power of buried secrets, and how they can erupt with catastrophic force. Ellie's life was taken not because she lacked bravery, but because the world around her lacked the compassion to embrace her. And Dwayne's blind rage stands as a chilling reminder of the destruction that can arise when identity, trust, and toxic masculinity collide. The case, sensationalized and dissected across countless platforms, remains a grim testament to the ways deep-seated societal pressures and unchecked emotions can fracture lives beyond repair. This tragedy lingers as a warning, a call for change in a world that so often refuses to listen until it's too late. If stories like this resonate with you, stay connected. In our next episode, we'll delve into another tale of secrets, cruelty, and survival. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Have you lived through something that left its mark? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might be the light someone else needs.